I'm Magnus Hawthorne, Master Editor. Many of you may know me for my editing works and various works and commercials, but today I'm here to answer your questions about how to properly edit the narrative in your Dungeons & Dragons games. Now I know what you're thinking. How is a video editor going to give me advice on my tabletop game? And if that isn't obvious to you, you probably need to be here. I have in my possession fan mail asking these important questions. Dear Magnus, I'm a very big fan. I love your Chuck E. Cheese commercial. Thank you. What is the most important thing at your Dungeons & Dragons table? Now, everyone knows how much I love a good narrative. And if you ask me, the narrative is the most important part of the game. It's the only thing you, as the Dungeon Master, bring to life. And to that, you have to put your sole focus on the narrative. Now, you may be saying to yourself that tabletop gaming is a collaborative effort, and that the players are making decisions that will impact the game. But that's wrong. It's just wrong. The narrative is what is important. And to that point, it's very fine to have an adversarial relationship with your players. They seek to disrupt your narrative. It's intentional. They want to see what they can get away with. And you might tell yourself there's nothing wrong with that. But fundamentally there is. If you were directing a movie and your actors refused to play their part, would you let them on your set? Would you put your editor through that hell? And the answer is you wouldn't. And as a dungeon master, you have to treat your players the same way. This is a narrative. It is a story. It's like a book, except you're not writing a book. You're letting your players write your book the way you'd have written it. Next letter. Dear Magnus, I'm sorry you got kicked out of Gen Con again. How would you handle disruptive players? I am also sorry I was kicked out of Gen Con. Not for what I did, but for how everyone responded. How would I handle a disruptive player? It's very simple. I would emasculate them. Players who seek to disrupt your narrative are again engaging in that adversarial role, right? And only your player can invite an adversarial relationship. Any decision you make in favor of the narrative is valid. Deciding that players rolling dice is an obstacle is fine. And to that point, deciding to humiliate and berate a disruptive player is the natural order of things. They are an agent of chaos in your narrative. And to that point, you are the only true correcting, editing force that can salvage that narrative. I would suggest insults, perhaps make fun of their weight or their appearance, and then go to perhaps any gossip you might know about them. Reputation destruction's good. Perhaps lie and say something that would damage their reputation in the group, but can't immediately be dismissed. Perhaps something along the lines of sexual harassment. If they don't flee from that, then perhaps you can escalate to physical violence. Next letter. Dear Magnus, I like your editing work. I like your Dungeons & Dragons advice. How do you make a good narrative? This is a very important question. As an editor, I find it's important to understand the the source material, the script, to review those, and then to take the broken mess of a project that the cast, the crew, the director, the camera work, all of that's going to be broken until you as the editor fix it. And your narrative's the same way. Your players are going to be broken. And it's your job to fix them so that they can perform adequately for your table. It's not just that your players are adversaries to your narrative, they're stupid. And so you have to hold their hand. You have to hold their hand throughout the project, throughout the entire narrative. And it's important to only tell them things they wish to hear. I once had my players enter a bar, and they asked to know the bartender's name, and that person was immediately emasculated. They know that that's inappropriate at my table. If the bartender has a name, I will tell them the bartender's name. Just like a Terry Brooks novel, he wouldn't introduce a character who's not going to be relevant to the narrative. And just like that, NPCs who aren't relevant and players who aren't relevant are ignored. Yeah, and so only give them the information that they need, not what they're requesting, not what they think, and God forbid they pick up a dice without you telling them. Next question. Magnus, sorry to hear about your court case. It's not every day that you have to defend yourself against false accusations of violence to a child. I agree, they are false. How do you homebrew a game? Well, that might be the easiest question of the night. As an editor, I think it is my core job to correct the mistakes that other people have made. And the best way to correct mistakes at your table is to correct the book before they arrive. When they make a game book, it's inherently built to fail. Every dungeon master will have to pick apart those pages and decide on a set of rules that will protect the narrative. Now, obviously, your players seeking to defeat your narrative will often reference the book when they wish to make complaints or challenge your power. And that's where the homebrew comes in. That is a list of designated rules you've created in order to advance your narrative. Now, for players who like to know about the rules and make decisions based on the rules, well, they're wrong. Again, they're actors in your movie. They are characters in your book, and any deviation of that needs to be addressed. And so when you homebrew, it's basically throwing the book literally out the window or at your players before making a decision. And that is how you homebrew. Next question.
Action.
Next question. Magnus, we'll go right to it. Is it okay to fudge dice rolls? Dice rolls. Very good question. I believe dice exist only to facilitate parts of your narrative you haven't fleshed out, which is a problem, because if you haven't fleshed out your narrative, dice are now an obstacle. If you do, for whatever reason, allow die rolls at your table, which is a mistake, you would need to be able to referee whatever decisions thereafter. As a DM, you don't have to roll dice. And so you can sure roll dice as a formality or to perhaps appease your player's sense of fairness. But again, there's no fudging the die roll if you're DMing. So if a player fudges a die roll, that's heresy. Players who are allowed the opportunity to roll dice and then attempt to cheat your narrative, that's beyond adversarial. That is sabotage. That would be like the catering boy on the set deciding to run onto a shot and moon the camera. Do you want your players mooning the camera? I thought not. This has been Magnus Hawthorne. Now, if you like my advice, if you need my advice, whether it's about tabletop gaming, or editing, or narratives, or relationship advice, please comment down below or send us a message. My time is valuable though, so don't waste it. Are we done?